Oh, that's
Should
better.
be live. Let's see.
Where's the
There's
noise
there's some
coming from?
feedback coming from
Yes.
somewhere.
I don't know. There was a lot last night.
There were
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
like three different technical issues last night. So tonight we're on Zoom for Havdalah with no technical problems. So hopefully everyone's internet signal stays strong so we can hear one another, see one another, and welcome to Havdalah with a bonus. We're going to begin with a story.
Well, you all may know that this is a television. I believe May is what they call sweeps month, which is where they show all the new shows and the finales and things. Well, we're sort of doing the opposite. I'm going back to a few of the greatest hits for a couple of weeks because the stories are so good that I know that not everybody got them all at one time. So I want to have them, and then we'll end with the end of the month, of course, with a Shavuot story because the following week will be Shavuot. So the first weekend in June. One of the reasons that there's actually a couple of reasons that I really like this story. One is that it's a great way to illustrate one of the things that I like about Judaism, which is legal aspects and how you actually make um, biblical verses into something that actually is something that's doable. This particular biblical verse is about the finding of lost objects. You don't really need to know that in the story. You don't have to be familiar. It tells it, but it's just fun to know that, there's biblically speaking, there's no finders, keepers, losers, weepers in Judaism. The other thing that I really like about the story is that it has sound effects. Now, what can I say? I'm a ham. I don't know if a rabbi can be a ham, but okay, you get the idea. So it's always fun to do kind of sound effects. So anyway, the story begins when Esther has really had a bad day and she's taking it out on the lump of dough that she's making for challah, for Shabbat. And she just slaps the dough when she realized that the butcher raised his price on chickens, so they can't afford chicken for Shabbat dinner. And she slapped that dough into a ball when she remembered the rude person in the market who shoved her, and she dropped the eggs that she had and that she broke. And then she really hits the dough for kneading it with the heel of her hand, and she remembers the heel of her of her shoe that came off when she slipped on a patch of ice. And of course, in those days, you didn't just, when these were taking place, you didn't just go to the store. You had to have someone fix it, and it's expensive, and they don't have a lot of money. But as she worked that dough for a while, she started to feel calm and started to think about Shabbat that was coming and put like all her troubles away. So by the time her perfectly braided challah was done, her shoulders had gone down and her face was relaxed and everything was ready for the meal. The children were all prepared and it was going to be Shabbat. So she stands in front of her candles and lights them and then takes a minute before she says the blessing to just really appreciate Shabbat being here and the peace and the quiet and the beauty of Shabbat, when suddenly she hears, her eyes popped open. What? She looks around and there are two huge red chickens wandering around the kitchen. In fact, they're not just wandering around the kitchen, they're pecking on the rug. They're jerking on the tablecloth until the kiddush cup falls over and the wine spills all over the place. The children start chasing them around the table, trying to catch these chickens before they ruin everything. And in that moment, Esther's Shabbat peace had been destroyed by poultry, by chickens. However, by the time her husband, Hanina ben Dosa, who was a rabbi and a scholar, came home from the synagogue, he found a peaceful house. Table set, the hot deal, a hot meal, and a quiet, calm wife. Esther, my love, he said as he sat down at the table, did you notice what I left in the kitchen today? Notice, dear? She said, pulling a few feathers that were stuck in her hair. Chicken feathers, by the way. Was there something to notice? She said, trying not to roll her eyes a little bit. Oh, Esther, you are wonderful, Hanina said, relieved. Other women might have been annoyed, but not you. So she smiled faintly at him and passed him the challah. Well, he began, not paying any attention to the fact that he had caused all this trouble, which she hadn't bothered to tell him about, but there was a farmer who was driving his chickens to market, and he stopped by to chat. He didn't notice that he'd left two of his birds behind, and by the time I saw him, even though I went after him, it was long gone. But don't worry, I'm sure he'll be back tomorrow to pick them, to claim them, because he'll know they're missing. Well, a week later, the farmer still hadn't returned for his chickens. Instead of pounding her challah to make her feel better, Esther was pounding nails into a chicken coop they were building in the kitchen. She said, Kanina, there's an awful lot of eggs that these hens are laying. We don't have that much to eat. Oh, wait, we're not allowed to take the eggs, are they? Because the chickens don't belong to us. And he said, no, you're right, dear, that's the law, but we can't just let those eggs sit there. We don't want them to spoil. They really piled up. Oh, I've got an idea. I'll take them into town and I'll sell them. So he bent over actually and patted the chickens politely on their heads as if he was somehow related to the fact that they had laid all these wonderful eggs. So he takes these eggs into market and he returns back really happy and says, you'll never guess what I got at the market. So Esther ran outside and found several sacks of chicken feed hanging against the market, against the house. And he said, chicken feed, but not only that, at the money I got selling the eggs, I bought 2 more hens. And he hugged Esther around the waist and swung her in the air. So Esther at first was excited. Oh, they couldn't come as a better time. The butcher raised the price of chicken and we could have chicken soup. And oh, wait, the chickens really don't belong to us. They still belong to the farmer because the eggs were really, the original chickens were his, which meant the eggs were his, which means the new chickens are his. Yes, Anita said, I'm sorry. It would be great to be able to have chicken soup because your chicken soup is the best I've ever had, even better than my mother's, although we won't say that in public. So Esther says, oh, well, that's what it is. So months passed and the farmer still didn't come back. And the chickens had more eggs and they sold more eggs and chickens multiplied until, well, basically the chickens were taking over the house. And one night Esther said, Hanina, we have to do something about this. Maybe the farmer is never going to come back for his chickens, but we can't have a chicken farm in our house. There's barely room for us, let alone all these chickens that you brought. And Hanina said, you're right. He said, look at the poor creatures. So he picked up his shoe and turned it over and out popped one of the little chicks that they had. They were having so many. He said, I'm going to take it all and I'm going to sell them today. So Esther was so relieved and she spent that morning cleaning every last bit of chicken out of the house. Her broom swack, swack, swack all the way clear. Open the windows, open the door, let the air out. There were no feathers in her house. She was so thrilled. And then all of a sudden she looked out the window and she heard Hanina, her husband's voice, Hanina say, you'll never guess what I got at the market, he yelled. And she looked in time just to see him enter the yard with a rope in his hand. So she ran out to the door, almost kind of afraid to look. You got rid of the chickens by, and she followed the rope to the end by buying goats. The shaggy creatures stared back at her kind of mournfully, like they weren't any happier with this than she was. Husband dear, she began, you really can't But suddenly they heard footsteps crunching down. It's the farmer, Fanina said. I knew you would return. I knew you'd come back for your animals, he said, holding out the rope for the man to give them the goats to me. He said, here you are. Oh, no, Rabbi Hanina, the farmer said. I lost chickens, not goats. He peered into the yard. What happened to my chickens? Is that all you can say? Said Esther. What happened to my chickens? She grabbed the rope that the farmer had given back to Fanina and put it in the farmer's hands. We tended a whole farm in our little house for months, and of course we didn't mind. It was the right thing to do. But you might at least say thank you. Thank you, ma'am, said the farmer, kind of confused, pushing the rope back into Fanina's hands again, saying, but what happened to my chickens? All right, said Esther. We took them in and made them comfortable and fed them while we waited for you to return. And they laid eggs, but they weren't ours to eat, and we wouldn't take what was ours. She grabbed the goat's rope again and gave it to the farmer. And the farmer looked at the goat and said, what happened to my eggs? You see, Hanina said, under my wife's excellent care, we had so many eggs that I had to sell them before they were spoiled. And with the money the eggs fetched, I could buy more chickens and feed. And with that chicken feed, the hens laid even more eggs. And then I had to sell them again before they took over our house. And with the money, well, that poor farmer's head was going back and forth between Fanina and his wife, and he was so terribly confused. Finally, Esther said they weren't getting anywhere, and she pulled him over to the side and said, let me explain, young man. My husband is well known as a very holy man, and he is such a holy man, he can make miracles. And for you, he performed the miracle of turning your chickens into goats. Now say thank you and take them and have a safe journey home. Well, the farmer really was completely confused by now, but that's exactly what he did. But to repay the couple for their honesty, he would bring them gifts from time to time. No chickens, thank goodness. Just little packages of fresh goat's cheese, which went very nicely with Esther's freshly baked challah. I also did a little bit of a feminist twist on this because one time I was reading, not this story, but my mother was looking at one, and she said, why is it the man who's always lecturing the woman for what it is? So I figured she's his wife. She probably knows as much about this as he does. So that's our story for tonight.
Thank you. So was that a story that we had heard before, or is that a new one? Because I don't remember that one.
You may have been, that may have been when you broke your hip.
Okay. That could be, because I don't remember the story. Okay.
Yeah. So it's new to you, so we have with something. And I love it. I just, like I said, between the legal parts of it and the fun and the sound effects and that poor farmer at the end. It just is, to me, it's a great story.
So I think we'll do Havdalah first, and then we'll count the Omer second. So we can light our candles for Havdalah. Hopefully. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen borei peri hagafen. From the fruit of the vine, we now continue with the besamim, with the spices. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei v'samim borei minei v'samim. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei me'orei ha'esh borei me'orei ha'esh. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Hamavdil ben kodesh lechol, ben or lechoshech, ben yom hashvi'i lesheshet yemei hamaseh. Baruch atah Adonai Hamavdil ben kodesh lechol. Take another moment to savor Shabbat a little bit longer, and then when we're ready, we put our candles out in our wine or juice. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Bimei V'Yaminu, Yavo Eleinu, Imashiach ben David, Imashiach ben David, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi. I invite you to unmute so we can sing Shavua Tov together to wish one another a good week and a sweet one with joy and all the things that we would.
Worried about Elsie.
Shavua Tov,
Tov,
Shavua
Tov,
Shavua
Tov,
Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov,
Shavua
Shavua Tov,
Shavua
Shavua
A
Tov,
good
week,
week,
a
a
a
week
week
of
of
week of
peace,
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 and
gladness,
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 rain,
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 and
joy,
joy
and
and
joy,
peace.
increase,
A
good
a
good
good
week, a
week,
week of
a week
peace,
of
and
peace,
gladness,
gladness,
rain,
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 and
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 joy,
joy
joy,
increase.
increase.
I wish everyone a Shavua Tov, and then I
Shavua
want to
Tov.
turn to counting of the Omer. And so tonight, since we began counting on the Saturday night for the second Seder, so the Saturday night when we're counting begins the new week. So this is the new week of hope. And the text, and this is from Rabbi Accounting at Omer, Accounting Omer, is the text is, and God said, I will take you out of the misery of Egypt. And so this is her thoughts for beginning of this week. It is possible to gaze upon the horizon and see that it is far away, distant from your touch, and it is in essence an illusion, a mirage. The thin boundary between heaven and earth shifts and changes and morphs, and it is simply not real. And in your heart you say, how impossible to catch the beauty in the distance and quickly turn away, eyes cast down to the smallness of now. And in this moment you are susceptible to cynicism or indifference or both. And it is also possible to gaze upon the horizon and to see its vastness as abundance and possibility. That thin line between heaven and earth is a reminder that your reach can extend beyond this simple life of circumstance and happenstance. And you gaze upon the horizon and you are inspired and enlivened and hopeful. Hope is anticipation, and anticipation is invigorating. And when you gaze upon the horizon and extend your hand to touch its magnificence, your mind expands, and your heart knows joy, and your spirit believes in the beauty that it sees. And you believe in the human capacity for courage and for change. You believe in the children. You believe that despite your current circumstance, things can be better. You believe with the strength of your character and with determination that you can mend what is broken. When you gaze upon the horizon and take a breath, catch your breath and realize that you can live with light and goodness. Do not look away. Practice hope. And when you do, you practice gratitude. So it is with those thoughts in mind that we count the Omer for tonight. And the blessing is the formula blessing, ending with the last words, Al Sfirat HaOmer, for the counting of the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu
melech haolam,
asher
asher kidshanu b'mitzvoto,
B'tzivanu
v'tzivanu
al
al
Sfirat
sfirat
HaOmer.
haomer.
And today is 22 days, which is 3 weeks and 1 day of the Omer. And Chesed Shebenetzach, loving kindness within eternity, is what the Neo Chesed site says for this particular day of the week, but the week is about hope. So those are our thoughts to send us off into this new week, and wishing it to be good for everyone. And we wish everyone on Facebook a Shavua Tov and a good continuing counting of the Omer, making every day count.